ExamPrep.School. Tennessee Personal Lines Insurance Exam, exam code INSTN-Pers07. There are 4 practice exams in this series. This video covers Practice Exam 1. The first 20 questions are free. In this video, we will be covering the following major categories for Practice Exam 1. Property and casualty insurance terms and related concepts. Property and casualty policy provisions and contract law. Tennessee laws and departmental rules. Common to life A and H, property and casualty. Tennessee laws and departmental rules. Pertinent to personal lines insurance only. Types of casualty policies. Types of property policies. Let's walk through the format. I'll read each question and its choices. Let's get started. Question 1. Under an HO2, broad form homeowner's policy, which of the following perils is covered for the dwelling? A. Earthquake. B. Weight of ice, sleet, or snow. C. Flood. D. Nuclear hazard. A countdown circle appears in the top right. Once it completes, the answer is revealed. You can pause at any time if you'd like longer to think. If you'd like additional practice covering more topics, see the description for our book. The correct answer is B. The HO2 form covers the peril of weight of ice, sleet, or snow for the dwelling under its named perils coverage. Reason A is not correct. Earth movement is excluded under the homeowner's broad form. Reason C is not correct. Flooding is excluded and requires separate National Flood Insurance Program coverage. Reason D is not correct. Nuclear events are excluded under all standard homeowners forms. Question 2. In an HO3 special form, homeowners policy, which coverage section is written on a named perils basis? A. Coverage C, personal property. B. Coverage B, other structures. C. Coverage A, dwelling. D. Coverage D, loss of use. The correct answer is A. Under an HO3 policy, personal property coverage is limited to named perils, while dwelling and other structures are covered on an open perils basis. Reason B is not correct. Other structures receive the same open perils coverage as the dwelling. Reason C is not correct. Dwelling coverage is provided on an open perils basis under HO3. Reason D is not correct. Loss of use is additional living expense coverage, not written on a named perils basis. Question 3. A renter with an HO4 tenant broad form policy returns home to discover these losses. Jewelry missing from a broken safe, garments ruined by dry rot, books soaked by a sewer backup, and a porcelain figurine shattered when a houseguest tripped and knocked it off a shelf. Which loss would be covered by the policy? A. Jewelry missing from a broken safe. B. Garments ruined by dry rot. C. Books soaked by a sewer backup. D. Porcelain figurine shattered when a houseguest tripped. The correct answer is A. This option is correct because theft of personal property from inside the rented premises is a named peril under an HO4 tenant broad form policy, while losses from fungus, sewer backup, and accidental breakage by a guest are excluded. Reason B is not correct. Dry rot is excluded because losses caused by fungus, mold, or dry rot are not insured under the policy. Reason C is not correct. Sewer backup is not covered since water backup and seepage losses are excluded under HO4. Reason D is not correct. Accidental damage by a guest is not an insured peril under this policy form. Question 4. A homeowner with an HO5 comprehensive homeowners policy experiences these losses: spilled paint on an oriental rug, termite damage to wooden beams, gradual leak stains on the living room ceiling, and floodwaters backing into the basement. Which loss would be covered under the policy? A. Spilled paint on an oriental rug. B. Question 21. What is the standard special limit for securities under Section 1 in a homeowner's policy? C. B. Likert scale question. D. Floodwaters backing into the basement. The correct answer is A. This option is correct because the open perils coverage under an HO5 policy insures against accidental damage to personal property, whereas insect infestation, continuous leak losses, and flood losses are specifically excluded. Reason B is not correct. Infestation losses such as termite damage are excluded under open perils provisions. Reason C is not correct. Gradual leaks are excluded because continuous or repeated water seepage is not insured. Reason D is not correct. Flood damage is excluded unless a separate flood endorsement is purchased. Question 5. Under the DP1 Basic Dwelling Fire Form, which of the following perils is specifically named for coverage? A. Smoke damage from agricultural smudging. B. Collapse due to weight of snow, ice, or sleet. C. Internal explosion. D. Breakage of glass from windstorm. The correct answer is C. The DP1 Basic Dwelling Fire Form provides named peril coverage only for fire, lightning, and internal explosion. The other listed perils are not included. Reason A is not correct. Smoke damage from agricultural smudging is not a named peril under this form. Only fire-related smoke is covered. Reason B is not correct. Collapse from weight of snow, ice, or sleet is a broad form peril in DP2, not covered by DP1. Reason D is not correct. Glass breakage from windstorm is an extended coverage peril, not part of the basic DP1 fire form. Question 6. Under the DP2 broad form, which additional peril is covered that is excluded under the DP1 basic form? A. Earth movement damage. B. Accidental discharge of water from a plumbing system. C. Volcanic eruption. D. Gradual moisture migration through walls, floors, or foundation cracks. The correct answer is B. The DP2 broad form adds coverage for sudden and accidental discharge of water or steam from plumbing systems, which is excluded under the DP1 basic form. Reason A is not correct. Earth movement damage is a specific exclusion under all DP forms and is not covered by DP2. Reason C is not correct. Volcanic eruption is not an insured peril under DP2 without a separate endorsement. Reason D is not correct. Gradual moisture migration through structures is considered maintenance-related and is excluded under DP forms. Question 7. A neighbor's vehicle crashes into an insured's detached wooden fence located 20 feet from the dwelling, causing significant damage under a DP3 special dwelling policy. Under the DP3 form, how will the fence damage be covered? A. Damage to the fence is covered under Coverage B on an open perils basis. B. Coverage B for other structures applies only on a named perils basis under the DP3 form. C. The fence qualifies for an additional coverage limit separate from Coverage B, capped at $500. D. The fence is considered a part of the dwelling under Coverage A and covered only for fire and theft. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that the fence as an other structure is insured on an open perils basis under Coverage B of the DP3 form. Named perils limitations, additional coverage caps for plants, and dwelling coverage do not apply to fences under this form. Reason B is not correct. DP3 provides open peril protection for other structures, so it is not limited to named perils under Coverage B. Reason C is not correct. Additional coverage limits apply only to trees, shrubs, and plants, not to fences classified as other structures. Reason D is not correct. Fences are classified as other structures under Coverage B and are not treated as part of the dwelling under Coverage A. Question 8. Which valuation method does a personal articles floater use to determine the settlement amount for scheduled jewelry? A. Actual cash value. B. Replacement cost. C. Stated amount. D. Agreed value. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is that the personal articles floater uses an agreed value provision, meaning the insurer and insured set a specific value for each scheduled jewelry item at policy inception, which becomes the settlement amount in the event of a covered loss. Reason A is not correct. Actual cash value applies depreciation to determine loss payment, but the floater locks in a value agreed upon at policy inception. Reason B is not correct. Replacement cost covers full replacement without depreciation, but is not used for scheduled jewelry under a floater. The floater relies on agreed values. Reason C is not correct. Stated amount floats subject to coinsurance requirements, whereas scheduled jewelry under a floater is insured at an agreed value regardless of coinsurance. Question 9. Which statement best describes the geographic scope of coverage for scheduled items under a personal articles floater? A. Coverage limited to the location described in the policy declarations. B. To hold investments whose performance determines contract value, separate from the insurer's general account. C. Coverage for scheduled items anywhere in the world, subject to policy provisions. D. Coverage only within the continental United States and Canada. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is that a personal articles floater provides worldwide coverage for scheduled items, meaning they remain insured anywhere in the world as long as the loss is covered by the policy terms. Reason A is not correct. The floater is not limited to a single premises. It extends beyond the policy's stated location. Reason B is not correct. Coverage under the floater extends beyond U.S. boundaries and its territories to a worldwide scope. Reason D is not correct. Coverage is not restricted to specific regions like the continental U.S. and Canada. It applies globally. Question 10. A homeowner in an NFIP participating community applies for flood insurance for a single-family dwelling. The home's basement extends beneath 60% of the gross floor area. Which condition would render the dwelling ineligible for standard NFIP coverage? A. More than 50% of the gross floor area is below ground level. B. The basement occupies 40% of the gross floor area. C. The below-grade area is used solely for storage. D. The lowest floor is elevated 1 foot above the base flood elevation. The correct answer is A. The NFIP requires that no more than half of a building's gross floor area be below ground. Exceeding 50% below grade disqualifies the structure from standard flood coverage. Reason B is not correct. Submerging less than half of the floor area keeps the building eligible. Reason C is not correct. Use of the below grade area does not affect eligibility when the percent below ground remains under the threshold. Reason D is not correct. Elevating the lowest floor above base flood elevation enhances eligibility rather than disqualifying it. Question 11. During a heavy storm, a municipal stormwater system surges and overflows onto adjacent streets, inundating 3 neighboring homes. According to NFIP definitions, which description best qualifies this event as a flood covered by the NFIP policy? A. Surface water accumulates on a single property but does not spread to adjacent lands. B. Overflow from an underground water main break, flooding one home's basement. C. Water seepage through foundation walls from a high groundwater table. D. Overflow of a stormwater system inundating 3 adjacent properties. The correct answer is D. NFIP defines a flood as inundation of 2 or more properties, or over 2 acres by water from overflow of natural or man-made systems. Overflowing stormwater affecting 3 homes meets that definition. Reason A is not correct. Flooding must affect 2 or more properties or a large area, not just one parcel. Reason B is not correct. Water main breaks are excluded. NFIP covers natural or system overflows. Reason C is not correct. Groundwater seepage through walls is specifically excluded from the definition. Question 12. Which of the following best describes the primary distinction between a split limits auto liability policy and a combined single limit auto liability policy? A. Split limits policy combines bodily injury and property damage coverages into a single per person limit, whereas a combined single limit policy applies separate limits per accident. B. Split limits policy specifies separate per person and per accident limits for bodily injury and a separate limit for property damage, whereas a combined single limit policy provides one per accident limit for both bodily injury and property damage. C. Split limits policy provides an aggregate limit per policy period, whereas a combined single limit policy resets limits after each covered claim. D. Split limits policy applies only to bodily injury, excluding property damage, whereas a combined single limit policy covers both types of losses. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is that split limits policies set distinct limits for bodily injury per person, bodily injury per accident, and property damage, while combined single limit policies offer one unified limit that applies to all bodily injury and property damage claims arising from a single accident. Reason A is not correct. This reverses the definitions. Split limits do not combine BI and PD into one per person limit. Reason C is not correct. Neither policy type provides an aggregate limit per policy period. Limits apply on a per accident or per person basis. Reason D is not correct. Split limits policies cover both bodily injury and property damage with separate limits. They do not exclude property damage. Question 13. Under the bodily injury liability coverage insuring agreement of a personal auto policy, the insurer agrees to which of the following? A. Reimburse the insured for medical expenses incurred due to bodily injury, regardless of legal liability. B. Pay damages for which the insured is legally liable due to bodily injuries sustained by third parties, and defend the insured in covered suits up to the policy limits. C. Compensate the insured for lost wages resulting from bodily injury claims brought by third parties. D. Cover property damage, liability of the insured's vehicle after an accident. The correct answer is B. The insuring agreement for bodily injury liability stipulates that the insurer will pay sums that the insured is legally obligated to pay for third-party bodily injury and will provide a defense for covered claims, subject to policy limits. Reason A is not correct. Medical expense reimbursement, regardless of liability, is provided by the medical payments coverage, not the bodily injury liability insuring agreement. Reason C is not correct. Lost wages are not independently covered under bodily injury liability. They only form part of damages awarded in a liability judgment. Reason D is not correct. Property damage liability is covered under a separate property damage liability. Insuring agreement, not the bodily injury section. Question 14. An insured negligently collides with another vehicle, causing $6,000 in body damage. The other driver sues for repair costs plus $20,000 in punitive damages. Under the property damage liability coverage insuring agreement of a personal auto policy, which would not be covered? A. Legal defense costs for the insured. B. Repair costs for the damaged vehicle. C. Punitive damages awarded to the other party. D. Loss of use expenses incurred by the other driver. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is punitive damages because property damage liability insuring agreement covers compensatory damages and defense costs but excludes punitive awards. Reason A is not correct. Legal defense costs are included under the insuring agreement and paid by the insurer in addition to policy limits. Reason B is not correct. Repair costs for the damaged vehicle are core compensatory damages covered under property damage liability. Reason D is not correct. Loss of use expenses fall under liability for property damage and are covered when the third party incurs substitute transportation costs. Question 15. An insured allows a friend to borrow the insured vehicle for personal errands. Which person would be considered an insured under the personal auto liability section of the policy? A. A person using the vehicle without permission to escape police. B. The insured's domestic employee using the vehicle in the employer's business. C. A neighbor allowed to deliver food as a paid service using the insured's vehicle. D. A friend who borrows the vehicle to run personal errands. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is the friend who borrows the vehicle with permission for personal errands, because permissive users are insured under the liability section when using the auto for non-business purposes. Reason A is not correct. Unauthorized use of the vehicle is not covered since there was no permission granted. Reason B is not correct. Use of the insured vehicle by a domestic employee for business tasks is excluded under the liability section. Reason C is not correct. Operating the insured vehicle for paid deliveries constitutes business use and is not covered. Question 16. According to the standard personal auto policy medical payments coverage, which of the following individuals is eligible for medical payments? A. Named insured's guest injured at a service station while washing the insured's vehicle. B. Named insured's non-resident relative injured while occupying a covered auto. C. Named insured injured while occupying a rented auto outside the policy territory. D. Named insured injured as a pedestrian when struck by a motor vehicle within the coverage territory. The correct answer is D. This option is correct because medical payments coverage under the standard PAP includes the named insured as a pedestrian struck by a motor vehicle within the defined territory, regardless of fault. Reason A is not correct. Medical payments applies only to auto-related accidents, not to non-collision incidents like washing a vehicle. Reason B is not correct. Non-resident relatives are not included under medical payments unless specifically endorsed as covered persons. Reason C is not correct. The policy excludes incidents occurring outside the defined coverage territory for any insured. Question 17. Under a standard personal auto policy, how does medical payments coverage coordinate with an insured's other health insurance? A. Medical payments coverage and health insurance share losses on a pro rata basis. B. Health insurance is primary and must pay its benefits before medical payments will respond. C. Medical payments coverage is primary and pays medical expenses up to its limit, regardless of any health insurance available. D. Medical payments coverage is excess and only pays after health insurance limits are exhausted. The correct answer is C. This option is correct because under the PAP, medical payments coverage pays first up to its limit without consideration of other medical insurance, with health insurance providing any excess benefit. Reason A is not correct. There is no pro rata sharing. Medical payments pays up to its limit before any other coverage responds. Reason B is not correct. Health insurance does not have primary status under the PAP. Medical payments pays first. Reason D is not correct. Medical payments is not an excess layer. It is always primary under the standard policy form. Question 18. Harper borrows her neighbor's motorcycle and is thrown off, sustaining $4,500 in medical bills. Her personal auto policy's medical payments coverage has a $5,000 limit, but excludes injuries sustained while occupying vehicles with fewer than 4 wheels. Based on this scenario, how will the insurer address her claim? A. Deny the claim because it excludes injuries in vehicles with fewer than 4 wheels. B. Pay the full $4,500 since medical payments coverage applies regardless of vehicle type. C. Deny the claim because she was not listed as a named insured in the policy. D. Pay the claim, but apply a reduction for borrowing a non-owned vehicle. The correct answer is A. The policy explicitly excludes medical payments for injuries sustained while occupying vehicles with fewer than 4 wheels, so the insurer will deny the claim under that exclusion. Reason B is not correct. This distractor ignores the exclusion clause for vehicles with fewer than 4 wheels, which takes precedence over the usual coverage grant. Reason C is not correct. This distractor wrongly focuses on named insured status, but medical payments coverage applies to any covered person regardless of name listing. Reason D is not correct. This distractor confuses a reduction for non-owned vehicles with the specific exclusion that applies here for fewer than 4-wheeled vehicles. Question 19. Cole is injured when another driver rear-ends him. The at-fault driver carries only $10,000 per person, $20,000 per accident liability coverage, below the state's required minimum of $15,000, $30,000. Under Cole's uninsured motorist endorsement, which defines an uninsured motor vehicle as one with liability limits below statutory requirements, how would the at-fault vehicle be classified? A. An insured motor vehicle because it had liability coverage in effect at the accident time. B. A non-owned vehicle because the policy does not list Cole as a named insured. C. An underinsured motor vehicle since coverage was insufficient to fully cover Cole's damages. D. An uninsured motor vehicle because its liability limits are below the statutory minimum required. The correct answer is D. By the endorsement's definition, any vehicle with liability limits below the statutory minimum qualifies as an uninsured motor vehicle, so this at-fault vehicle meets that definition. Reason A is not correct. This distractor misclassifies the vehicle as insured simply because some coverage exists, but the endorsement requires meeting minimum limits. Reason B is not correct. This distractor wrongly applies named insured status to vehicle classification, which is not relevant for uninsured motorist definitions. Reason C is not correct. This distractor confuses underinsured motor vehicle classification, which relates to exhaustion of limits, with the policy's definition of an uninsured vehicle based on statutory minimums. Question 20. Under the ISO personal auto policy, which of the following vehicles would not be classified as a non-owned auto? A. Car rented for 15 days under a short-term agreement. B. Vehicle leased under a written agreement for 7 months. C. Auto borrowed from a friend with permission. D. Employer-owned business vehicle used for personal errands. The correct answer is B. A lease term of at least 6 months is treated as an owned auto. Non-owned autos include shorter-term rentals, borrowed vehicles, and employer-owned cars. Reason A is not correct. Short-term rentals under 6 months are classified as non-owned autos under the policy. Reason C is not correct. Vehicles borrowed from others with permission are categorized as non-owned autos. Reason D is not correct. Employer-owned vehicles used for personal purposes are defined as non-owned autos. Enjoyed this practice test? Tap like, hit subscribe, and share it with a classmate. Got a question we should tweak? Comment below, we read them all. Find full practice exam books in the description or at ExamPrep.School.